All right, so we're here. We're going to talk about Gypsy Rose Blanchard. You guys know who she is, right?
Vaguely, more or less, but it's on the news all over.
Right, and I guess the big story is that it seemed like now that she's out, it's been found out that she did not have the conditions that she thought that she had since childhood.
Yeah, this is a wild story. It's all over the news right now because she just got out of prison a couple weeks ago.
December, 28th?
Something like that, just right last year. She's been in prison for something like 8 years. She's in prison for aiding or assisting, being an accomplice in the murder of her mother. Okay, and this goes back decades to when she was a little kid. She apparently is brought up by her single mom, and the mom clearly had some mental health issues. There's this issue of Munchausen disease by proxy. This issue is where the person suffering from this, at its base, it's a mental health condition. And they form the belief that someone in their care has all these medical ailments. And so this is what was essentially going on with Gypsy Rose and her mom, Dee Dee. So her mom is convincing her from when she's very young that she has all these pseudo-horrific sort of conditions, cancer and leukemia and muscular dystrophy and sleep apnea and all this stuff. And she's having medical procedures done to her. And the mom, Dee Dee, is physically altering the way Gypsy Rose looks. She's shaving her head. She's getting her a wheelchair. You've heard this stuff.
And on top of it, she's using that to get financial benefits, both from, I believe, the government and also, I believe, from other foundations and things like that, and get financial benefit. Right.
Ronald McDonald's house, something like that, for medical, Children's Hospital.
And we don't know about any of this because this isn't national news. This is just some family in the middle of the country doing whatever they're doing. But what brings this to light initially is that this girl is growing up, Gypsy. She's growing up. She's starting to realize in some capacity that either my mom's not altogether there, clearly doesn't have my best interest at heart, or I need to get away from this woman because she's not letting me grow and live and do whatever. And so she starts to have these ideas or thoughts of getting away. This happens some 10, 15 years ago, still not really widely known. But what really comes to light is when she meets this guy, Nick Gojan. They're dating or having some sort of romantic relationship. And at some point in time, they come up with the concept of, we need to kill my mom, Dee Dee.
So the dating was online, right? If I understand it correctly, it was everything like through one of those dating apps or something like that?
Yeah, because I think he lived, at least initially, he lived in another state, right? They were in Louisiana. They leave after Hurricane Katrina. They move somewhere else in the United States. He lives up in Wisconsin maybe or something like that. And yeah, it starts that way. But we're looking at this, this Gypsy Rose girl, she's probably going to have some mental health issues of her own, especially given the environment that she grew up in.
And I think part of her background too is I don't think she went to school at all, maybe kindergarten or up to second grade at the most, and then she was homeschooled by the mother as another way to continue the abuse and control. That also plays into her development and just her mental capacity to analyze and just make decisions.
Yeah, I mean, this is wild.
So where do we know whether that was part of, when it came to sentencing, whether that came up and whether that was an issue in the sentencing?
Yeah, I mean, she meets this guy, Nick Gojan. They conspire, do whatever. He ends up killing the mom with some heavy assistance in some capacity by Gypsy Rose, whether it was, tools or whatever that she provided, some assistance. And they get popped after going on the run and stealing some money from the mom. They get popped. They get arrested. Both of them get convicted separately. He gets convicted of first-degree murder, I believe, and he's in jail, I think, on a life sentence.
Yes.
She gets second-degree murder, 10 years, serves 8, gets out now. But you raise an interesting point because at the sentencing, I think, didn't something come to light where maybe she didn't fully realize she didn't have all these medical ailments?
Right, and I think that's actually a very interesting point to kind of consider is someone who obviously was subject to such intense both physical and mental abuse, should that be taken into account first when she acts on it and tries to get away from the abuser? But I think also the other interesting part of it is, and does it matter where, if she finds out about, because she found out eventually that she doesn't have these ailments? Does it make a difference if she found out that she did not have these ailments before the killing occurred as opposed to maybe afterwards? Does that enhance or detract from the sentencing?
Well, I think it should absolutely make a difference, and more of a reason if you find out before the killing to kind of justify this, because at some point then you can argue, right? She's fighting for her life. Part of the medical procedures that she was, some surgeries, I don't know what type of surgeries, but if you don't have anything wrong with you and you're undergoing this medical procedures and you're taking all these medicines, that's affecting you one way or another, right? And we know that every medication has side effects, and we don't know to what extent that already damaged her and is putting her life at risk that she wouldn't have been otherwise. I would argue, what if she's defending her own life? If she found out before killing the mother that this was happening.
I mean, I definitely think it goes to mental state, right? This has to be considered in some capacity. I don't know to what extent it was. Obviously, she was charged with a lesser crime than the boyfriend was, but she didn't do the physical act, although we've seen not actually pulling the trigger, you could be charged as an accomplice almost the same, right? Or some sort of conspiracy surrounding it. But yeah, like you said, good point. She's on medication. She's being treated for these things. She's being viewed in this capacity. Clearly, this is affecting her own mental state. So that's an interesting point, and I don't know. And my guess is probably a little bit of both, right? There's probably something she found out beforehand that probably led to the increase in her adverse action towards her mother. But I'm sure that stuff was still coming out at some point in time after she was arrested and charged. That, wow, none of this, right?
And I think it brings us to a general point where someone is the subject of this abuse. The abuse should be, or at least, that's an opinion, I guess, but the abuse should be a relevant factor in sentencing and in the guilt phase and the sentencing phase. Right, as a cause as to how a person reacted, or how she, especially in this particular situation where the abuse, both the mental and the physical, have lasted for such a long time.
Yeah, I mean she's not playing with a full deck, so to speak. So I think it has to come into some capacity. It has to come and be a factor.
And again, if we go back to the whole, you mentioned the mental state, her mental health. She was also being forced at some point to act and be a younger age, and so we don't know how she developed, how that affected her mentally as well. And if you have been forced to be a certain age all your life, 7, 8, whatever, then at some point you are that, right? I mean, she was very limited in the type of people that she was interacting with.
This brings up an interesting point on top of that. That is, there's this outward manifestation that is being created by Dee Dee, by the mom, and Gypsy Rose is a part of it. And they're going not just to, out in public to the store and a friend's house and the school, or not school because you said she was homeschooled, but they're going to medical offices, they're going to medical facilities and being evaluated and treated by doctors, and none of these doctors or medical professionals ever, really got tipped off to anything that this girl is healthy or doesn't have these things, or is there some other level of child abuse going on committed by the mom, Dee Dee?
Well, I believe one of the doctors started suspecting or seeing some red flags at some point somewhere in 2011 or something like that. But nothing, I don't believe that there was anything done about it specifically.
Right, and we learn about this way after the fact.
Right.
That this doctor comes forward and, oh yeah, I kind of thought something was suspicious, but no reporting of anything to authorities in any capacity. I don't know if enough about the early stage of this before this case came to public light, but was the mom ever questioned? Did child services ever talk to her? Right? Nothing.
Don't doctors have a duty to report if they suspect any sort of abuse? And in this case, wouldn't doctors know about this condition, this mental condition, and have a duty to report that?
They do, and I think that no matter, it just brings back emphasizes the fact that no matter how many mechanisms we put out there in order to flush out abuse, both child abuse or any other abuse for that matter, domestic abuse, domestic violence, child abuse, cases still get through the crack. Everybody still has to be vigilant about that.
All right, so what's really making this sort of headlining now is that Gypsy Rose is out of prison. This whole story is now, she's a starlet almost, right? Everybody wants to interview her. Everybody wants to make a book and a movie and a TV show out of her, and there's already a bunch of TV shows and things that are in the works, or movies that are in the works, or have happened to some extent. I know there was a documentary a couple years ago, but she's all of a sudden a big time presence on social media, influencing going on there, whether it's all by her own volition or just by being a media darling for what's going on. But this is really kind of like a morphing story that's growing and growing. So, I mean, it's kind of wild to see that she's getting all of this hype and publicity. I don't know, what do you guys think about that?
Well, I mean, I think that's what's happened with society nowadays, right? I mean, with social media and everything happening now, you become famous whether you did something good or something bad.
It's true.
In my opinion, I don't particularly like it, but that is the era we live in now.
And I guess there's two sides to this coin. On the one hand, you don't want criminals benefiting from the crimes that they've committed. I guess in this particular case, you almost feel for her, right? And for her life story, to almost, you take at least think about, well, maybe there should be some compensation for everything that she went through, considering she can't sue her mom, right? And for all the abuse that she took through all these years, and thinking that the majority of her childhood was spent thinking that she was having a terminal cancer, and denied all the childhood memories that she could have had.
And going with that, you make a good point. Maybe telling her story will highlight to other people what to look for and prevent this happening again, or at least making people more aware of the type of conditions, mental conditions that create certain type of abuse.
Well, Gypsy Rose has become an advocate for child abuse and for the warning signs, or what to look for this Munchausen syndrome by proxy. So she's definitely trying to take, at least she's manifesting this outwardly, her experience with it and what she could do to, alert and warn others. But, to your point, like, what kind of life is this girl gonna have? She's still relatively young, but with all the trauma and abuse she went through, killing her mom, spending 8 years in prison, this is not a well-adjusted person that's being released into society. So this is going to be, she's got a rough road ahead of her, and maybe never will live a normal life. I don't know. The real question, right, where we all want to know is, did the mom deserve it? Was what happened to her? Did she get what she had coming to her, type of thing? Or is this way too extreme? And obviously none of us can be put in that situation and answer that question firsthand, but I don't know.
I think there's going to be people on both sides of that question, and I think only time will tell. As far as her ability to integrate into the society, into the world, and live at least some semblance of a normal life after undergoing all these years of abuse.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I feel sad. I feel bad for everyone. I feel sad. Mental health is such a big issue nowadays, and this begins well before mental health. The real mental health crisis came to light recently in this country, right? And so here's a couple of people, maybe more, that really needed some help, probably never got it addressed in any way, never identified in any way, and this is what we're left with. It's sad.
But I think when you talk about mental health, right, I think the issue becomes when you're already an adult, because if you find out that there's some sort of mental issue, so as a parent, if you find out that your kid might have some sort of mental issue, but they're already 19, what can you realistically do about it if they're already an adult or consider an adult, right? So I think that's what has not been addressed yet, what we haven't addressed as a society, how to handle that.
Yeah, no, you raise an interesting point, and this is part of the battle that everyone has is, is there an expiration date, right, where they've gone past their shelf life and you just say, oh well, or it's like, get them help.
Yeah.
I don't know. Crazy story though.
Very
great
crazy.
story.
Yeah.
Interested to see where it goes next, because this is not the final chapter in Gypsy Rose Blanchard.
No, but whatever it is, I do hope that she finds peace, and I do hope that she finds a way to have a life, right? I mean, it doesn't seem that she's had a real chance at having a life so far, so.
No. All right, guys.
All right.
Good talk.
Right.
Good
Yeah.
to see you guys.
Good to see you. Bye.
So what do you think about Belichick?
Or Pete Carroll. Can we talk about that?
I mean, Pete Carroll's staying. He's staying put, right?
Well, he's going to be